Alright guys, we're going to tackle an OM642 turbo rebuild in this episode of Ready Rebuilds. So for starters, this turbo is again on the OM642 engine, which is predominantly found in any diesel Mercedes. So mine in particular is the ML320 CDI. The BlueTech newer models as well, which were rebranded as 350, also use the same engine, similar turbo, and in fact this particular one has the EGR temperature sensor or gauge right here, which measures the temperature at the exhaust level. Mine does not, that's why it's plugged. So for starters, what originally failed on mine is the vanes were stuck, and I thought I could just basically take it apart and clean it, but this one actually snapped just now, trying to bend it back to see if they would bend. But basically they, if you look at it from a glance from above, this is the new replacement vanes. You will notice that they're actually bent, as well as there's a lot of basic texture that's missing from them, and it looks like something tumbled around that actually caused them to break. Some of the arms, if you notice, they're actually got a piece missing completely, so not good essentially. Yeah, a lot of them are chopped off. So when I saw this, I'm like, holy crap, I'm gonna need a new part. However, to make matters worse, if you look at the actual turbine or propeller over here, there's a piece missing on each of the blades on the hot exhaust side. So feels like something was literally tumbling at very high rate of speed. The fact that this snapped is, again, shows me, because it is cast metal, so it shows me that they bent over time with the heat that was basically developed inside. So although I was able to clean these just so they would look a little bit more presentable for the video, including the ring arm that moves it, I didn't bother with this because I only needed it for perspective to make sure that the alignment pins and everything were the same as on the CHRA that I bought. So first things first, we gotta state that both this as well as the new core or CHRA were purchased from China. Part of the reason is the company that I bought, PowerTech, was not only affordable, but I had seen a couple of videos on YouTube of other YouTubers that had rebuilt them, and have had actually a high success rate with the parts lasting more than a couple of years. And this particular turbo was brand new from the dealership, rebuilt, that the previous owner, based on the history that I pulled up, had replaced in 2018 in May, and it failed since. Part of the reason why I think it failed is a couple months ago I had one of the exhaust manifolds on the driver's side basically fail, and it actually blew a hole through the exhaust manifold where I was hearing air escape, and it sounded like basically there was an exhaust leak. Upon closer inspection, once I replaced the part, I noticed that the baffle inside was actually loose, so it had collapsed and it was actually moving around. Now at the time I thought that no particles had penetrated the turbo, but as I've come to find out, not only was that not the case, and basically something definitely went inside, but I think this could have been partially problematic since I first purchased the vehicle. It is a high mileage car. I got it with 176,000 miles, and it's got 192,000 right now. So now what I've done is actually disassembled all the turbo components, and I will go over some of the issues that I ran specifically during disassembly, particularly with two things. One, there's 5 screws that hold this cover in place right here. One of the mistakes I made is, again, all of them, and people tell you to use lubricant, either WD-40 or PB Blaster specifically is the one I like the most, since it tends to loosen more than WD-40, and a lot of heat. So 3 of the bolts I was able to remove correctly, but this was prior to me stripping 2 of them by just applying brute force, essentially, without necessarily applying any lubricant or heat. Once I stripped those 2 heads, I was worried that basically I was not going to be able to get this thing off, because it's such a tight clearance that trying to saw them off or anything would just not work. I was able to actually remove them, believe it or not, with drill. So what I did was I drilled the center, very fine drill bit point, and then as I moved up and expanded, basically what happened is I was using lubricant to keep the heat on the drill bits lower, And when I noticed one of the screws actually moved a little bit, so what I did was I increased the drill bit size, reversed the drill, and voila, they both came out fairly quickly at that point. So I was glad that was the case. Now the screws in question I've got over here on this nice little organizer. So they are, these three are the originals. I believe they're T25s for the hex. Now I'm still undecided if I should reuse these or not, since they're the original ones, or just use the stainless steel ones that I got. Now, prior to acquiring the stainless steel, I thought they were going to arrive on time. I purchased Home Depot ones. Now these, to note, they are M4 bolts by 0.7, and the length of them is 10 millimeters. So I had to use one of these as a basically gauge to figure out which one was the right size. The Home Depot ones, these are just socket, and these are just regular hex caps. However, they are just carbon steel, they're not stainless steel, so I figured I would use the stainless steel since it is able to withstand more heat. These I've kept as parts, but they are part of the ring mechanism, the nozzle that opens and closes. I have an extra one of these, but one is the original for the turbo actuator arm that holds it in place. The other one, since when I first diagnosed this issue, I disconnected it. I lost it somewhere in the engine bay, and haven't been able to find it since, so I just used one of these regular clips to do the job. I can buy one of these from the dealership as well, but I believe they charge like $10 for either one or two of them, so it felt a little bit of a waste. And I've organized the bolts separately. So these are for the hot side of the turbo, the exhaust. These are on the cold side. Intercooler, these three are additional ones that hold the bracket in place. The ones I just grabbed over here are the actual snap rings that fit on this. So let's start. Let's go over some of the initial steps. So the first thing I did was actually sand both this and the Y pipe down. I covered them with some masking tape, and this is high heat paint from Home Depot that you can also find in automotive stores. It lasts to about 2000 Fahrenheit. They also had a regular high heat, I believe, grill paint that goes up to 1200 Fahrenheit, but just to play it safe, it was only $4 more for this one, and yeah, it's not like you use it that often. Alright, so first things first is we need to remove the masking tape. We'll leave the Y pipe for now, since that may go in toward the end. But first let's remove that for the EGR, for the EGT, I believe it was the sensor, which is, I think, pretty much a temperature sensor. Mine does not use it, that's why it's blocked off. But the Bluetech models do use that, so you will actually see a sensor that goes in there. Now again, this I only did purely for aesthetic reasons. There was no need to do that. I'll show in some of the other images on the video that I'll throw in, but I already sanded this down with a wire brush, so it was technically clean to begin with, but just being more of a perfectionist and didn't really want to see any surface rust going forward, so it is important to remove any extra residue tape that may be painted over, because this thing will burn essentially when this thing heats up, so just to prevent it from smoking more than it should. Okay, so this is clean now. Take a look at this other side. Now I've got brand new gaskets for it, for pretty much any of the parts that are removed. My go-to place for a lot of the gasket is FCP Euro. The guys are great, not only because they're located nearby in terms of shipping, but again, their lifetime warranty for these parts is kind of a no-brainer. Again, with a lot of these, I think part of the reason that they're able to offer is not everybody really will do what I'm doing, which is rebuild part or keep a vehicle for a very long time. But I've got both of this ML and a W211 E55, and I consider both engines extremely reliable long-term, as long as you maintain them. So I've had the E55 for close to 10 years now, actually, and the ML for about 2 years. And but I do love the torque and the efficiency of the gas saving factor on the 320 CDI or on the OM642. So yeah, can't go wrong. Alright, so like I mentioned, part of the thing, part of the reason I kept both this and this is to kind of figure out where the pins are. One thing I noticed with this particular part is the installation of the ring is in the wrong place. So when I looked at the new part and how it aligns where the arm opens, it is supposed to align where basically this little pinhole and this one align on the small and large pin correspondingly, and they don't. So as a result, I thought I could just get away with just wiggling this in there and then snapping the zip ties and then basically just dropping it in place, but unfortunately this is not going to be the plate. Alright, so let me show you guys the brand new CHRA. So again, PowerTech. I will say this, that it was pretty much amazing service in terms of shipping. I ordered this quite literally Saturday or maybe Friday night, and it's already arrived basically as of Monday. Today is Tuesday. So, and it was packaged with more plastic and more wrapping, but I kind of removed it just to inspect it and make sure. Now I have heard that because this is the dry side of the turbo, or the hot exhaust side, it is supposed to be dry of any grease or oils or any residue. So as we go along, I'm going to try to wipe a lot of that. Part of the reason I think is, I mean, at the end of the day with that temperature it'll burn off anyways, but one, you don't want a lot of those oils to go into the catalytic converter or the DPF filter, and two, it'll actually, I'm assuming it'll help things stick on it better, which you kind of don't want on the exhaust side. You kind of want it free flowing. So now supposedly these are balanced in England, but again, being a mechanical part and considering I'm using the actuator, the original Garrett Hella, that's the part that tends to go defective or wrong with a lot of the turbos, and people are hesitant to buy the Chinese one because I've seen the internal electronics not be as reliable as the German ones. However, the irony is Garrett announced that basically they produced their 20 millionth turbo in China. So as much as there's a bias against buying Chinese parts, at the end of the day, it looks like they're made in China nowadays, so there's no escaping. Alright, so we'll start with the exhaust side first. Now before, there used to be a locator pin here that in the earlier versions I believe they located in the wrong position, so I am glad that they no longer chose to include it. I did inspect with the old one, it is in the same location. I just basically destroyed it in the process. You'll see the damage here and here. Part of the reason was, aside from getting the issue with those screws that actually hold this in place, this was actually stuck to it. So I basically removed the cold side of the turbo, being aluminum, that it could basically be damaged easily, and while holding onto this side, I pretty much had to bang it in place onto a very hard surface until this eventually got disconnected. The screws are already gone at that point, but the surface rust and the mating surface that it had was basically not allowing it to do that. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and cut the zip ties on this, and unfortunately, like I said, we will have to move that from its current location, and we will have to, here, let's move this over here for a second, and we will have to realign these pins in a different location. 2, and let's see here, 3. Now, believe it or not, this part cost almost as much as the entire CHRA. So this was, I think, about $60 with shipping. This was about $105. So they're quite expensive. And part of the reason I wanted to save this is this was $80. Again, all from China. So even being Chinese, they're not cheap when it comes to a certain point. But this was definitely a bargain compared to the cheapest turbo I could find was $1,100 with free shipping, brand new. The original one from Mercedes, if you buy it at the dealer, I believe it was $3,800 on sale from $4,400, so quite a big price difference. So again, not only did I save close to $1,000, we'll say, on the entire setup from just the cheapest Garrett OEM Hella Turbo, but I saved basically, you know, $3,500 or so, at least from the dealership perspective. And again, this was just replaced with the previous owner in 2018, so it did not last a very long time before that catastrophic failure. And the car still had power, but as you can imagine, it was not spooling correctly and building up boost on the exhaust sides. Alright, so let's take a look at this. So now part of the issue with this is, again, we're supposed to align. So let's see here. So we've got the small pinhole here, the large one over there, and this is supposed to be somewhere over there. So let's see here. So if we move the actuator arm somewhere here, put this in place, it's supposed to be about yay. So let's try this position first, and we might have to move it. So let's take a look at this. A small, big pinhole over there, yep. So we're going to try this position right now. So let's see if this makes sense. Again, we've got the actuator arm here, which is supposed to be almost perpendicular essentially to these two. So we've got the two pinholes, actuator arm kind of on the side. Let's see if this works. So before I install those rings, I'm going to try to just do it with this. Well, so much for that, because it's a brand new part. Okay, the camera battery died on us, so luckily we had another one charged already. Boom. Okay, so and this one's stuck and that one's in place, so let's see. So this little piece of tape greatly helped us in terms of aligning. I just screwed up the direction twice. But yeah, as you can see, we've got a proper operation. So now before we lose our place in line with this, we need to take care of the following. Now this one's supposed to just slide, very tight fit, and again, the holes will dictate where this goes because it can only fit in so many. There is also a locator pin apparently there that if you align it, it should be in the right location. For this part, I actually prefer to take my gloves off because I feel like I work a little bit more precisely with my hands. And because they're sweating underneath there. Okay, so now just to hold it in place, let me put in the original screws so that this doesn't go anywhere. Okay. Since it doesn't want to play nice, let's go ahead and use one of these to help us. Again, this is just a placeholder so that I don't lose my place. Alright, so it's time to get the stainless steel bolts. Now as you can see, the original ones sit pretty flush in there, indented in. These ones aren't necessarily as flush, but we will see. I did see that the thickness of the head was a little bit more, that's why, but the length of it is 10 millimeters, so in terms of the grip they have, it should be the same. Let's use some red Loctite. It's a little bit much, so my trick is just use the threads on each other. That's great. So much for taking the gloves off. Alright. Slightly more. And now let's go for the first hole. So T25 is the original one. Looks like this may be a T20. Yep. Now let's see. Based on where this sits, that shouldn't create a problem. Nope. Just needed to verify the fact that these stick out a little bit more. But again, should not be an issue. So these are the 20s. So let's go, just like when we do head cover gaskets, we're going to cover them diagonally. Okay, we no longer have use for this right now since we're putting brand new ones. I am going to keep these just for reference, but again, they are M4 metric bolts by 0.07 and 10 millimeters. They are centered because initially I was worried that we had run into an issue by the fourth or fifth one in terms of the alignment, just like you sometimes may with a car wheel, but looks like they tend to center themselves based on how the holes are, the actual cover cap on this. Alright. Let's see. We overdid a little bit on this one, so let's redo it. Okay. Now the local hardware store did not have these particular ones in stainless steel, so I had to order them online, but it is something you should be able to find fairly quickly. I believe for 10 of these I paid $7 with free shipping from a US manufacturer. Okay, my trusted Husky. And ratchet. This one has another extension, and the tool, although it's old, it's come in handy so many times that now again, these just need to be tight enough, not that you snap them, but so that basically with the Loctite thread locker they don't loosen up under extreme heat. Alright, so now I can twist it and be comfortable. So if you look at the mechanism, it functions correctly and it does a proper seal, whereas these guys right here, no matter how you align them, I mean, you look at how scored they are, they look honestly like the surface of the moon, where it's just cratered up and it's been hit by objects. Not to mention that it's just completely tilted. So basically 2 of these would never make a proper seal, and as you can see, some of them had holes. Now combine that with the fact that these never properly sealed because they didn't have the proper arch going all the way through to the end, and yeah. Okay, so let's close this red Loctite up, since we'll use that later. I think we're finished with this for the time being, so we don't need that as a reference point. So we can throw that in here. I did keep the pins that normally go in there as well as extras, but again, for right now, we don't need that part. Let's clean up the workspace a little bit. Okay, so what do we do? That's good. Since our hands did get a slight bit of oil, let's go ahead and get new gloves. And let's also remove these. We don't need this for now. We'll keep them inside. Alright, so that part's done. Next, let's go ahead and see if we can put the colts of the exhaust. Alright. Actually, if I forget, let's do the snap rings first. Oh, whoops. Should remember that the container this thing came in was basically pretty oiled up to keep it lubricated, so a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Let's go ahead and clean that. So when I flipped it over, it actually left a little bit of oil residue. We ideally don't want that, so alcohol should take care of it. Alright. First one running smoothly. Second one needs to jump over the first one now, so, and there we go. So pretty quick and easy. These kind of basically, just like piston rings work, help seal pressure between these so there's no gaps. Again, and because they're steel, it's something we can both reuse and doesn't get damaged over time. Now the steel ring will go over this. I've already cleaned that up a little bit. But let's see, so there's a little bit of surface rust on this, which I may pause the video and clean it up prior to installing the exhaust side, because I just want to refresh. And then this will go on the cold side. Now the black one is the original one, the red is the new one that came on. So let's see here. Let's install the exhaust side. So let's leave this here for a second. Wipe a little bit with that. Honestly, the quality feels great. I mean, the only thing missing is the labels, but they quite frankly feel like the same thing. Now we'll see. Maybe I'll jinx myself with that, but. Alright, so this should have a locator pin right there that would fit directly over that. So first things first, let's get a bit of paper towel, a little bit of alcohol. Let's clean this up of the extra oil residue so we can use this as a stand platform, since it does a pretty good job protecting everything. Okay, should be enough. Perfect. Alright, so we know that we've got a locator pin right there, so that will be clocked this way. However, the one thing we have to do first is the ring. So I'm still torn between reusing the old one or just putting a new one. I mean, the new one is the red or orange material, which should be good enough for this, but we'll see. We'll apply this, and if it leaks, worst case scenario, we'll just have to take it all apart and do it all over again. Not with the blade side, but with the other side. Let's make sure that this is properly seated. Okay, looks good. Okay, that's the pin, so that's what we needed. Now I've got to rest it a little bit of an odd angle until I get the bolts in, but and you can actually see the pin on this side that's sticking out. So next we've got these bolts. Of course, I go and place it in the wrong hole because this one is for the actuator. Now, luckily, there are different threads, so it doesn't go in there, but again, just the fact that so we're going to tighten these all by hand for the time being, and then we'll go in with the little wrench that I have. We'll take care of. Alright. Apply them diagonally just so it holds it in place in the correct location and it doesn't slide. Yeah, so much for gloves. This is why I love using just bare hands, because nothing slips like this. Now again, since these are being tightened on a cast aluminum, I wouldn't go crazy on the torque. There's no real torque specs because it's not like Garrett tells you how to rebuild one of their turbos. They just want you to get a new one. But since this is the cold side, these don't necessarily need to be tightened with thread, with the red Loctite thread locker. Okay, we'll go with two more. Yeah. Just looks so good when it's brand new, geez. I mean, when I compare it to the take a quick break and drink some coffee. My little espresso. And we'll pause the video right here real quick, and I'll continue with the cold side. Let's see. Alright, so since I stopped the video, I did screw up a little bit because I went and tried to wire brush the spring ring over here, and at one point I think the wire brush got caught denting this a little bit, but I was able to bend it back so that at least the general texture and circular shape is there. So considering technically only the edge of this basically stops any gases, and I was able to fix the edge itself, I'm not too worried about any exhausts or anything like that, gases seeping through. Again, the actual two walls are intact. But yeah, note to self, never use wire brush on something this brittle because it could lead to problems. Considering this will be basically first here, placed here, and then pressed, it should be fine regardless. Alright, so what we gotta do now is tighten where we left off. This is an amazing wrench. I originally got it for bleeding brakes, and I actually used it on my AMG to bleed brakes, so it has an 8 and a 10. However, the clearance that this provides over here is perfect. So let's go diagonally to this one first. Let's move this over here before we dent it anymore. Okay, this is good. These are 8mm, by the way. And last but not least, this one. And then we'll go around tightening them all. Not going too crazy, just enough where I feel that they're tight and holding the actual lip. Okay. Okay, that's done. Alright, let's wipe off a little bit of this grease and residue, and we'll move on to the next thing. Check the operation again, and I mean, this is so free moving that it just drops by itself. Whereas before I had to literally fight it because they were rubbing against the upper walls, I believe. Unfortunately, we had another dead battery on the camera, so I'll try to go through this as quickly as possible. So let's place the ring this way. So again, the locator pin is over here. It is missing in this case, but we know exactly where it's supposed to go at least. So this has a little notch for the pin to go over there, so we'll place it that way. Okay, so it is aligned now. As you can see right there. Now if we want, I can leave a little something for it to make sure that it stays there. In terms of the clocking. Now let's see what we can drive in. How about this bicycle inflator needle? And it's perfect. This one, let it move. There's a notch on these already, I'll use it that way. As you can see, the previous one left an indentation. Not that it matters, but so one thing I forgot to do, which I should, so I'll redo it, is some thread locker, Loctite. Since this is the hot side and we don't want these ones coming apart due to the heat, we will do this. And I will tighten one of them just to make sure that the clock spring is in place. Let's remove these now. I'll clean some of the old thread locker in there. Alright, so Okay, so now it's time to tighten them. Since this one I believe I already tightened a little bit. And these will only basically, the washer will prevent them from being. Right, this time it was not an issue with the battery, but the card was full. So I finished tightening all of these. This thing served its purpose because it was perfect to clock it. Now, two things. We need to install this. Before we do, let's verify that the internals look good on this. So, to do that, we need one of these little hooks. Try on the middle side since it's probably a little bit easier. I've removed these already, but it will be a pain in the butt. It will be a pain in the butt too. Find the clip in a little bit, but there's two more. So the goal of this is we're going to make sure that the actuator looks good and it's performing as it should. So let's see. Okay, these things like to fly. Great. And a little blood never hurt anybody. Alright, we're going to take a quick pause just to collect the clip. Okay, now that we've located all the clips that flew, the reason for this is again to remove the plastic encasing and to verify that there's no grease or residue or anything in there. There we go. And as we can see, it's a good thing we did because this is covered in oil. Actually, never mind. This is not oil. This is the original this is the original coat that they used to protect this from essentially getting fried from liquid. So it's like a solid coat. And a lot of times what tends to break on these, and part of the reason why I did this is usually one of these pins these are all good, so we can put this together. All I'm going to do is clean this up a little bit of the excess residue from the electronics coating. And then we'll seal it right back up. So good news, because these are pretty hard to come by in the OEM quality, and they're usually about 200 to 250 I've seen, if you manage to find one that's a Garrett genuine. Alright. The only reason I cleaned this is to make sure that the it doesn't conflict with the rubber gasket that's around it, designed to protect. So it looks like I may have broken one of these pins last time I removed them, but oh well. So a lot of times I've seen with the plastic gears shred, but as you can see on this one, they're fine. Okay, so I'm gonna go for 2 seconds off camera and see if I can blow some compressed air to clean some small black dust particles that I see here. And I may use some like silicone gear oil. And then we'll assemble this and we'll be done. Okay, so let's take a quick break. Okay, we're back after cleaning this with compressed air. So now the one thing I plan on doing is to prevent, since they are all plastic gears and components, except for the wheel and the electromotor, I plan on using some of the 3M silicone paste, which again is designed both for lubrication and is safe in case any of this gets into the electronics. So I'm just going to smear this over the gears. And I've also used this silicone paste to fix the sunroof in the car, the sliding mechanism. I know the dealers tend to upsell their own, but it's pretty much literally the same material. So another efficient way of beef, I have the brush here, but I feel like this would be a little overkill, but let's see. Remove all that residue. So we don't need that much excess. Let's take this off. Not as smooth as what I was doing, so we'll just stick to that technique with the pick. We don't have much to go, so and this allows me to go into the individual gears, whereas the brush kind of makes a mess out of everything. Again, the goal is to kind of prevent it from generating some of that plastic dust and just have the arm actuate and move a lot easier, so it's technically slightly less strain on the motor. Now the reason I'm adding a little bit both to the wheel and the gears is I only have access to the front of the screw mechanism, so basically when that spins, hopefully some of the extra one I'm putting, the excess that I'm putting on the gear itself, will lubricate the back of it too. And a little bit on the plastic gear here. And again, this is safe on electronic parts. It doesn't conduct electricity, so it won't short anything out. I think when I first opened it the first time around, it had a little bit to begin with, but because I wanted to clean the dust, I used some brake cleaner and electronic parts cleaner to make sure that I cleaned all the plastic residue and make sure that this wasn't the culprit of some of the issues I was having, and it turns out it wasn't. So, okay, same thing here. We're going to go on the gears. Try to reach back there since we've got the pick. It's a bit much. In the back of the gear, is that right there? Wipe some of this excess off the wall and include it right there. This should be sufficient. So again, we're good to go. So these contacts will touch there, and yeah, we don't need to touch this portion. Looks pretty good. And this is engaged based on those, the electrostatic thing as it moves. So now these are supposedly programmed to the turbo, so considering mine is gonna be the same thing, it shouldn't matter, but yeah, something worth considering if you're actually having issues. So now after you click them in place, I'll go ahead and I'll push these pins. Part of the reason why they were such a pain in the butt to remove is because I had already bent the pins in place. One of these was missing because once I removed it last time, I didn't put one of the pins back, but I'll have to do that now. So, got a little pin. Not with this, that we'll just use. They are pretty hard, believe it or not. This thing is like definitely steel. Okay, open the arm a little bit back. And let's plug it in. There we go. So we got one there, one there. Just the arms at the top. I'm gonna throw these two at the bottom as well. I'll leave the one on this side off only because once I find where I left the other one, because I know I didn't toss it. So now let's bend some of these back. Alright, so we took a short break to actually delete, or actually free up some more space on the memory card and swap batteries on the camera. And now we're back. So we're done with the 3M silicone paste. This thing's been reassembled. All the pins have been pushed in. I don't think we'll need this anymore. Let's see here what we've got. So we'll throw these as extras, and same thing with this. These three bolts, and one and S3 as well. Alright, so let's clear up some space. So, everything's done with this. What we need to do now is mount the actual actuator. So for starters, let's see, where did I leave? Oh, there we go. Speak of the devil. So these have two little joints that technically can rotate around. This one's a little bit stiffer because I grabbed it with the pliers the first time around, but they move fairly easily regardless. However, I did press it a little bit on the side, so it doesn't move as smoothly as this, but it should be fine. As a matter of fact, should be fine. Alright, so first we're going to move it here. We'll put the original clip on the back end since we have less access to it. And just push it in. Okay. It is in. So what we'll do now is we'll rotate it so that it's up. Actually, it's not in all the way, so we'll push it in further. There we go, now it's able to rotate. The OEM clips are just a little bit harder to take out and place in, so I guess more secure in that aspect, but at the same time it's not like this one doesn't do its job. I mean, at one point when I had this disconnected and I lost the original one, I actually took a paper clip and I actually just wrapped it around and it was able to hold fine without any issues. But if you're looking at hundreds of thousands of miles or thousands of hours of operation, then yeah, that's where it comes into play. So just to verify, this is all tight, considering we won't have access to this particular bolt. Yep. And same thing with this. Yep. Alright. So this is 3 bolts. These right here. And 3. We don't need to go crazy on these. These again just hold it bolted to the turbo. And last but not least, the actuator arm over here. And again, until I order an original one, what I did was one of these universal clips. I've got a whole case of them, different sizes, but I bent one of the smaller ones slightly just so I knew it would fit here, and it should snap in place fine. There we go. And it won't slip. It's always supposed to have a little bit of play. But other than that, the turbo is rebuilt. Clearance is perfect. There's no rubbing or anything. Otherwise, we would be concerned with that. I did wire brush clean this and this. So on this end, if we want, we can actually mount the Y pipe. So let's move this here, along with any other tools before we clean them up. Secure the blade. Organize the tools before we go crazy. These are either E10 or E12s. Let's check them out. Nope, E12. There we go. Now we'll grab a wrench, an adjusting wrencher, basically with the E10, E12 from, I think it was Gear Wrench was the brand. I know the adjusting ones that basically click, a lot of people had issues with the mechanism jamming under high torque, but in very tight to reach places and stuff where this socket depth as well as the ratchet won't fit, those things are ideal. And although in the beginning I was skeptical of these sorts of bolts, they seem to hold just fine. So because I cleaned them up, I'm actually going to reuse these just for the attachment of the Y pipe and the bracket. But the one on the exhaust side that basically feed into these two, I actually have brand new bolts for those. So let's see. Alright, these are all the same length. So first things first, I actually need the blade back to take out some of these. Masking tapes. Now, due to the kind of odd shape, they always rip out in pieces, never in one. Because I mean, it was a triangular thing. I thought the edges would have been sharp enough to allow me to cut it fairly easily, but I had to go around with a blade. There was no way around that. And again, this is purely aesthetic. There's no real purpose. I mean, after I wire brushed them, I could have left it that way, but considering the wire brush portion is the part where they technically require you to sand it before painting anything so it sticks, the majority of the work had already been done, so I said to hell with it, why not? And then hopefully make it look a little bit nicer and more presentable. Of course, for a 200,000 mile car this is irrelevant, but for me the vehicle is more so of a workhorse and a utility vehicle. I've carried so much stuff with it. I mean, even with my AMG I have the roof rack, so I definitely utilize the full, I think, 250 pound weight limit that they have. But for this particular one, because it's the diesel, part of the reason I want to make sure that the car runs smoothly and fine is mine already came with the 850 watt radiator fan. And all I did was initially I got an aftermarket hitch that from Kirk that would only support 3,500 pounds. However, I've since been able to acquire an OEM one, which basically has two bars that slide into the frame and then bolt on there as well. And the tow rating for the vehicle for this particular one, or the GL, is for this one at least is 7,200 pounds. I believe for the GL is 7,500 if I'm not mistaken, being a heavier car, so it's able to hold more stable. But in terms of the towing capacity, the diesel is the one that can tow the most. So I wanted to utilize the full towing capacity of the vehicle. That's why I kind of did it. Alright, let's see now. So we've got a brand new gasket, so let's go ahead and grab that. Alright, and again, these are from FCP Euro, and as you can see, genuine Mercedes parts. They've honestly got the best prices, and if not the best prices, because of their lifetime warranty and very, very fast shipping. In my opinion, they're the best in the business. I did order some parts as recently that FCP didn't carry from Auto House AZ, so if those guys turned out to be as good as FCP, then again I'll be utilizing both of those companies heavily going forward. So let's see. So the reason I think this goes in first is because it does not give you clearance to mount the bracket later if you want to do that. So let's move it a little bit more in view. Alright, so let's grab two of these bad boys. Make sure that they clear the holes. And again, it's a metal gasket, so it'll only go in one direction based on the shape. I'm only hand tightening these for right now, just so that the whole mechanism stays as a whole. This is another genuine OEM one. I believe the original one had an aftermarket gasket here prior to me removing the turbo, I should say. So once I removed it, I saw that it had an aftermarket gasket here, and it was a genuine, but it didn't have the locating pins. So now I don't know if the locating pins are supposed to stay in there because they are plastic, so I don't understand the logic of placing something that could theoretically melt. And we've got one more bolt here. Now I can use the socket just to allow me to get a little bit more grip. Oh, wrong one. There you go, right here. Yeah, why don't we let that socket go into the turbo, of course, after all this work we've done. Now, prior to going crazy with this, I'm going to check the torque specs, because I don't know off the top of my head. I do have the Star Diagnostics, so I have access to EPC and WIS. EPC will give you the exact part numbers. WIS actually has the manuals to tell you the specifics of the tightening. So these are fine because I do have clearance from that angle. So place these as well. One and two. And as I mentioned, this bracket is extremely strong. I tried to just bend it the other day just for kicks, and yeah, there's no budging. You have to think this basically helps sustain the turbo. There's two turbo bolts which should be arriving soon with my shipment of a few other gaskets for the front end of the car, where I did a lot of work in the cooling portions, and I'll cover a lot of those in another video. But they're imperative as far as periodic cleaning, so that you basically clean the opening ports, and the car is able to breathe better. So let's see here. I do have what appears to be a piece of paper in here. So get rid of that. And we will only slightly torque them right now, just so there is a little bit of Mercedes. Again, I'm going to look at the specific specs because that one does have it. So we'll see real quick. 1 moment. Alright, so last bolt to tighten. Again, I'm going to have to retighten them later, but this is just so it's properly assembled as a single piece. And voila! So this entire mechanism, if you were to buy it from Mercedes, everything you see here is, I believe, $3,700. I found it online. I believe they only sell rebuilt ones. They don't no longer sell brand specific new ones. I do know that if you buy a Garrett from some websites, it says it's genuine and it's made by Honeywell. That about 1,100 to 1,300 is on average, but again, it depends on the version or the revision of the turbo. So if you notice, this is DSP2, so this is the second revision, and if you look at the actual serial number, it'll actually say there it's the 777318-2. You might also see 5002, but it's, I believe, the same version. And this has the 80 at the end, which I believe that it stands for the rebuilt part. However, yeah, at this point it is complete and it's free flowing. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and plenty of more content will come, not just Mercedes, but in general, when it comes to construction, mechanics, engineering. My goal is to basically develop the channel into something that's enjoyable for people to watch, and again, informative in case somebody wants to tackle the work themselves, and if not, just provide some good content. Thank you for tuning in.